We begin our program with the latest change in the Trump administration. Breaking news coming in. U.S. President Donald Trump has replaced Secretary of State Rex Tillerson on Tuesday. Mr. Trump thanked Tillerson for his service in the Twitter post. CIA Director Mike Pompeo will be appointed the new Secretary of State, whom the U.S. President said in his tweet would do, quote, a fantastic job. CIA Deputy Director Gina Haspel will become the spy agency's new chief, whom Trump tweeted as the first woman to hold the post. For more on this, we are joined by Mr. Wang Yiwei, who is the Jean Monnet Chair Professor of Renmin University and the Director of the Center for European Studies. In Boston, we are joined by Jim Walsh, Professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Also joining us, we have also some of the other comments possibly in the program. Let me come to you, Mr. Wang. Your quick response to the news.
Well, the rumors come true.
Finally.
Yeah, finally. I think maybe President Trump wants to change the situation because of the many headache relations with his partners, particularly the trade war. And also, they want to make a deal with Kim Jong-un, of the DPRK leader. So many of the things that the new thinking, they're more efficient, want to solve this problem. They want to change the situation that the United States is facing in the world.
All right. And what about you, Mr. Walsh? The news.
Well, yes. Well, it's a surprise. It's sort of like death. You expect it. But when it finally happens, you're surprised when you wake up and read the news. I guess it solves one of the puzzles that was in my mind from last couple of weeks. You had Ambassador Jo Yoon, Special Representative of the State Department to North Korea, resigning, and then virtually the next week, the president saying he wants to talk to North Korea. Why would a diplomat in charge of talking to North Korea resign when the U.S. is just about to begin that dialogue? And the answer, obviously, is that the president had lost all faith in Rex Tillerson and in the State Department. He's been meeting with Pompeo. Pompeo is the person who gives the president his briefing, intelligence briefing. They obviously established a strong relationship.
Right.
And so without much pomp or circumstance, the president dismissed Tillerson with a tweet, not very professional in my view.
Let me ask you here, Mr. Walsh. It is no secret that the president has different opinions from Mr. Tillerson. Mr. Tillerson has been regarded by the president as, quote, the establishment, or too much establishment. Meanwhile, the two have different opinions on several issues. DPRK issue, Iran issue, Middle East issue, as well as climate change issue. These are crucial issues facing the United States. The two have very different opinions. The question is, the next one in the post, is that going to be very different when it comes to the opinions and the roadmaps?
Absolutely. It's going to be a dramatic difference. And so not only are our views different, the relationship is different. Mr. Pompeo is from one of the most conservative states in the United States, Kansas. He was a Tea Party member. He has called for regime change in North Korea. He is in favor of ripping up the Iran agreement. And this morning, as the president was getting on Air Force One, he mentioned his disagreement with Tillerson on the Iran agreement as one of the factors leading to his firing. So I think two things are happening. You're getting a much more conservative, much more hawkish person as an advisor. And then secondly, that hawkish advisor has a much closer relationship to the president. That's a big change.
Having said that, though, a lot of these issues have to do with China as well. Being the second largest economy, there's a trade issue China and the United States need to work out. And that involves international relations, foreign policy. Secondly, there's also the DPRK issue, in which China, from the very beginning, as a part of the six-party talks, and certainly a crucial player in getting all parties to talk to one another. When we are reaching the possibility of Trump meeting Kim, the Secretary of State has been sacked. So, Mr. Wang, what do you think China, as a result, would bear in mind, given the personal change going on right now?
That's the number one, number two world economy in the world. The relations between the United States and China, I think we need the certainty, of course. Now we are facing many challenges, the trade war. So this changes the position, of course. The Minister of Trade maybe it's more in handle of the issues with China, and then the Secretary of State maybe play more important roles to hand over all the troubles that President Trump makes the relations with the world, and the need maybe more intelligent guy to deal with so-called sharp power with from Russia, even the thing about from China. So they negotiate with the North Korea side. They need more the experts in intelligence analysis.
But when you think about that, Mr. Walsh, the Secretary of State, Mr. Tillerson, has never been really that involved because he and the President have very different opinions when it comes to how to approach to the North Koreans. So at this point, do you see there's going to be policy change from the Trump White House toward the possible relations with the DPRK?
Well, I think Mr. Pompeo will support the President's desire to have a meeting. My concern, though, is if the summit goes poorly, Mr. Pompeo will be in a position to whisper into the President's ears in favor of the bloody nose strategy or in favor of the use of military force. So I think that could end up going very poorly, if you ask me. In other words, he will support negotiations because the President wants negotiations. But if those negotiations don't go well, he will be advocating the use of military force, which I think is a really bad idea. And on China, Pompeo has said different things. He has said that China is a threat on the same level of Russia. He also praised China for the help for its actions on North Korea. So I think his views about China are a mixed bag.
On the other hand, you are also seeing, Mr. Walsh, the shuffling or reshuffling of members of the White House over the past few weeks. You talk about the State Department personnel change when it comes to Korean issue. Now we have the Secretary of State. Earlier you got the special advisor, you know, the John Kushner, and also today personal advisor for the president also was being sacked, being taken away actually from the White House. You also have earlier resignation coming from the communication director of the White House. You also have from the social media of the White House as well. So you see a long list of people who are resigning. Many of these people have been with President Trump when he was candidate Trump. So how should we understand this whole line change or change of lineup of the current White House and even of the current key positions in the Trump administration?
Well, I don't think this is going to stop, by the way. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how long National Security Advisor McMaster lasts here. But this shifting of constant exodus, shifting of personnel, it produces chaos. It undermines the policymaking process because people are new. People with experience have left. People don't know who's who or who's responsible for what. So I don't think it's very, I think some change is inevitable in any administration, but a constant churning of senior level people is probably not good. I would say number two, and finally, this creates an opportunity for Mr. Pompeo to have outsized influence. If everything and everyone around the president is changing and he doesn't have people he really has strong personal feelings for, I can imagine that Mr. Pompeo could step into the breach and have even more influence, given that chaos.
But whether he will have that much power or influence is an issue of debate, and probably we need to see. Before we go, Mr. Walsh, a final question for you. We see this power struggle between this White House, particularly between President Trump and the so-called establishment of the Republican Party. As we are approaching the midterm election in the United States, that power struggle is becoming ever more fearful. So here's the thing. With the sack of Secretary of State, which is usually a significant figure representing the so-called establishment of the Republican Party, what does that mean, this power struggle between Trump and the so-called establishment?
Well, I think it's definitely taken a hard turn. Mr. Trump is going to be in a much more permissive environment. Tillerson, McMaster, and Mattis were always counseling more moderation. Now one of the two is gone. I expect a second of the two to be gone, and in their place are people who are much more aggressive. And so the president's going to be in an environment where his aggressive tendencies are going to be supported, not constrained.
All right. We want to thank you, Jim Walsh, coming from the MIT, joining us from the security programs over there, and Mr. Wang Yiwei. Mr. Wang, you want to stay with us for future discussion on our program today. And thank you, Jim, for your input. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, on the breaking news that the U.S. President Donald Trump just sacked the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. We'll be back after this.